Bonjour and welcome to Random Info Corner. I am your host, Mini Tiny, and today we will be talking about the artist behind Fantasmagorie. I do apologize in advance for not being able to pronounce some of these French names. For those of you who don't know, Fantasmagorie is an animated cartoon dating back to 1908. The term Fantasmagorie is defined as a constantly shifting complex succession of things seen or imagined, which is why the cartoon is constantly changing, from a cannon engulfing a clown, to the cannon rotating as a bottle, to it unfolding itself and becoming a flower, thus freeing the little clown that was trapped inside. This is the perfect example of Fantasmagorie. Now, I am certain that many of you don't know the historical meaning behind this cartoon, and that's okay, because that's what I'm here for. It was argued to be the first recorded hand-drawn animated cartoon in history. Today actually marks its 115-year anniversary. For those of you who have yet to see this historical cartoon, I will leave you a link in the description box below so that you too can be a part of this historical day. If you have seen the footage, then you may have noticed that it looks like it was done on a black board with white chalk, but this is actually an illusion. As the creator traced his drawings over a light box, he realized that since his film would be projected at the rate of 16 frames per second, he guessed that he could cut his work in half by only drawing 8 frames and then photographing it twice. Thus, he ended up with 700 drawings. The paper he used was actually white rice paper, and the ink was Indian ink. After photographing the images himself, he went to the laboratory and asked if they could print them in negative in order to preserve the white on black chalk line effect. It was created by none other than French animator Émile Cohl. If you don't know him, then you're not alone. Even after he completed more than 250 animated films, nobody truly knew him. He was unknown to the public and ignored by the industry. He died just as he was beginning to be recognized. Born in 1857, his mother died when he was only 6 years old. His father sent him to live with relatives until he was old enough for boarding school. In 1870, Paris was in a turmoil, but even then, Cohl would skip school with his friends and wander the streets. He was fascinated by the caricatural propaganda posters that were plastered all over the city. After the war in 1878, Cohl constantly fought with his father, who was determined to apprentice him in some respectable profession. He chose to join the army, and when his 3-year enlistment was up, he decided that he wanted to draw and caricature his life. André Gille, the foremost political caricaturist of the day, took an immediate liking to Cohl, who eventually regarded Gille as his surrogate father. Cohl was a practical joker and he loved word games. He even changed his name from Quartet to Cohl. He probably did it to pun on coal, which means paste, and to signify his intention to stick by his master. But in 1881, Gille had been hospitalized with a mental disorder until he was sent to the infamous Charenton Asylum. When Gille slipped into complete insanity, only Cohl remained by his side, until the day he died in 1885. Gille's lonely final days left a permanent trace on Cohl, who would later perceive a parallel between his own neglect and the desertion of Gille by his friends and the public. By 1900, Cohl had abandoned the outdated Gille-style facial caricatures and worked on the comic strip format. He was even recognized in articles. In 1908 winter, Cohl was walking in Montmartre when he noticed a poster for a film that apparently stole an idea from one of his comic strips. That, unfortunately, was a common practice at the time. He went to the Gaumont studios to demand compensation. There, he met Louis Feuillade, the artistic director for the company. Feuillade was amused by Cohl, that he offered him a job writing scenarios. Cohl took the job offer seriously and wrote several. Fuyad realized that Cole's experience as a popular graphic artist would be invaluable for creating comic strips and encouraged Cole to adapt his own. As he continued to work on writing scenarios, he also worked on the Fantasmagorie drawings. He was influenced by James Stuart Blackton and his work such as Humorous Faces of Funny Faces, released in 1906. The inspiration Cole took from Blackton was a little clown and a middle-class gentleman. He drew them in a much more charming manner. He finished the film in July and released it in August. It was an international success. Leon Gaumont was pleased with the work, that he made Cole a full-time salaried director. By the time he left the studio, he had completed 77 films. He was the first to use matte photography to combine animation with live action. In Clair de Lune Espagnol, or The Man in the Moon, released in 1909. He was also the first to abandon the hand-cranked camera for one with an electrically driven shutter. Gaumont's constant pressure for a film every 2 weeks forced him to resort to labor-saving shortcuts, which he later regretted. As successful as the films were, Gaumont turned a deaf ear to Cole's request for a raise. Charles Petit, a rival of Gaumont, was able to lure Cole to his Vincennes studio. But as soon as he arrived, Cole had second thoughts. Petit pressured Cole into directing live-action films, in addition to trick photography and animation. After completing 10 Jobard films, he quit. Only one of his 8 animated films survived, that being Le Retaport de Serville, one of his best works. Arnoux, his friend and technical mentor, asked Cole to join him at the Eclair Company's new studio in Fort Lee, New Jersey. In 1912, Cole began working on The Newlyweds. The Newlyweds, for those of you who don't know, is a comic strip created by George McManus. McManus was actually the one who received all the credit for the films and not Cole. But this is understandable because motion picture personnel were still generally anonymous, and Eclair was anxious to profit from McManus's immense renown. The releases, however, proved to be irregular. The announced goal of a film every other week was impossible, but amazingly, Cole alone was able to complete the 13 all-animated Newlywed films. The Newlyweds became the first cartoon series with reoccurring casts of characters appearing regularly. It was the advertisement for the Newlyweds that the phrase animated cartoons was first used to describe this new genre. After an 18-month stay, Cole moved back to France. But in March 19, 1914, there was disaster in America. A fire in the editing room of the Eclair laboratory destroyed all the highly flammable nitrate negatives and went up in smoke. Then in August, the First World War erupted in Europe. His last significant film, La Maison du Fontouche, found an independent distributor in 1921. In the 1930s, occasional reporters were shocked to find Cole living in poverty with his grown son, Andres. In 1937, Cole was working by the light of an oil lamp and accidentally knocked it over. The fire spread quickly, and he was placed in a charity hospital. He died of pneumonia on the night of January 20, 1938, shortly after his 81st birthday. It was also the eve of another World War, which delayed his proper recognition in France. As we see the father of animation rise and fall, we cannot help but admire the fact that despite everything that has happened to him, he brought us the first recorded hand-drawn animated film, was the first to combine animation with live action, with studios pressuring him to draw like his life depended on it, even if those films started to disappear one after the other. Truly a legend, and yet it's like he never existed, not until he died, like many famous artists before him. Take this time to watch Fantasmagorie and appreciate how this cartoon helped start the animation you know and love today. Before I go, I would like to mention that today's history lesson came from the book Before Mickey, the animated film 1898 to 1928, written by Donald Crafton. I apologize once again for not being able to pronounce some of these French names. If you need reassurance, you can always look in the description box below. Share this knowledge with other people who might be interested. And remember, I got your back. This has been your host, Mini Tiny, wishing you a historical day.